everybody. Just I'm sending you the lesson via the YouTube. Not the most conventional way of teaching on a Tuesday morning, but I've got to go to a funeral today, and the details have only just recently been given. So I'll be there later this afternoon, probably about 1:30, 2 o'clock. But I wanted to set you going on your work, and this seems the best way, really. So what I want us to think about today is obviously the International Day of Disabled People. That was yesterday. Each year on the 3rd of December since 1981, a day has been given over to disabled people in recognition of the inequalities and barriers that they face, and in the hope that we can eradicate those barriers and inequalities. What I want you to do today is I've hired 2 video cameras from college, and I want you to split up into 2 groups. Within your groups, I'd really like you to focus in on the International Day of Disablement. The theme for this year is removing barriers to create an inclusive and accessible society for all. Within that, there is huge scope, and I'd really like you to start to explore what are the barriers so that we can start to chip away at their removal. We're going to talk a little bit in a minute about some of the barriers that are apparent, but I'm going to give you a little bit of information first about the vastness of impairment. According to the United Nations International Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities, there are over 1 billion people within our world. That makes up about 15% of our populace with some sort of impairment. And that can be seen as the world's largest minority group. Huge numbers. And of course, within that minority group, there are other minorities. But for today's session, we're really just focusing in on the vastness and the inequality within the group that's given over to disabled people. I want us to explore, as I said, those barriers. And we've talked a lot over our last 2.5 years about the barriers that are inherent in people's lives. That can be physical environment, it can be the methods that are given over to communication, the use of language, the information that we give to people and the formats it's given in, how accessible are those pieces of information. It might be access to technology or lack of adaptations to technology to enable disabled people. It could be policy and legislation and the focus for disabled people. How we encourage that group of people to take part in our electoral process. As I said earlier, 1 billion or 15% of our populace have some sort of impairment and are categorised as disabled people. And why is it then that within our parliaments, within our hierarchy of managers, do we not see these groups of people reflected, and the impact of that lack of representation? Let's start to challenge and explore the reasons, but also to put in place how we might enable further participation for disabled people. We know that for people with disabilities or disabled people, there is lack of opportunities and unequal access to not only society but our education systems, employment, healthcare, transportation, and as I said, those political systems. I want us to really focus in on social justice. What does it mean to be socially just? what does equity mean not only to us but to our society, and how can we start to challenge people's perception of social justice so as to enable minority groups. I want us today within this lesson to really use the video cameras to explore our community's understanding of impairment, of what it means to be disabled, and how can we highlight the inequality that's embedded within that disablement aspect through social model thinking. You know, under the Convention of Disability, it's recognised that disability is an evolving concept, and that results from people's interaction with people's impairments, but also the attitudinal barriers and environmental barriers that hinder participation for that group of people. I want us, by the end of the day, hopefully, to have some footage that we can put back out, but also that we can make comment on, so as to support and challenge people's understanding. You know, Article 9 of the Conventions of the Rights of People with Disabilities states that all people with disabilities should be able to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life and development. One of the key measures that it did was to call upon all states and all state parties to take appropriate measures to ensure that people with disabilities have access to all aspects of society on an equal basis. And within that, those state parties should be exploring what barriers to participation are there, so that they can identify and eliminate those obstacles so as to facilitate and empower disabled people. You know, this isn't just a focus on our own close community, it's an exploration of wider society, the barriers that are globally there, and really what I want us to do is to really focus in on promoting accessibility, understanding, and challenging people to remove those barriers. Within your day, what I want you to think about maybe is a theme for removing barriers to create an inclusive environment. And you can go about that in any way you want. It might include researching within our community what barriers there are to education, to employment, to transportation, to accessing travel, tourism, sports. It can be absolutely any aspect that you're interested in. You might want to first start that with interviewing each other and filming each other's understanding and replies to maybe set questions that you've devised. If you're asking people questions, I would really like you to contemplate the type of questions you're asking and the effect of those questions on the individual recipient. You need to be aware that this is very much like your dissertation, in that you can't just ask any old question. You have to bear in mind the effect of those questions on the individual and the interpretation of those questions. So the first thing I would ask is that maybe you draw a list of questions around the subject you're interested in exploring and test those out with the group so that you can redraft them so that they're open enough for people to engage in, but not sensitive and very personal. Is there a kind of an issue that you might want to explore about our own community? Is there an issue there that you think could be tackled? And if so, might you buy into that that issue and explore that issue and how that excludes accessibility to the community? Ultimately, what we want to do by the end of the day is to focus on issues related to the removal of barriers so as to create an accessible society that's beneficial to all. And then hopefully what we'll do is we'll put this back out on YouTube so that people can engage with it should they wish. Okay, I'll see you very soon, and I'm hoping to be there, like I said, about 1:30, 2 o'clock. If you've got any questions, contact Vicky. I'm sure she won't mind. Okay, bye.